Welcome to Cannabis and Vaping, Know the Risks. This presentation is brought to you by the PAW Friendship Center Incorporated and the Northern Regional Health Authority. We received funding, a microgrant from Health Canada, and our information was also provided to us by the Addictions Foundation of Manitoba. So there are a lot of, we'll call them rumors out there, a lot of things said about cannabis, also known as weed. They say weed is natural and so it's harmless. We hear this a lot. But actually the evidence says early and regular marijuana use can affect the developing teen brain and is related to mental health problems. Another one we hear very often is everyone is using weed. Well, this statistic is from 2013, but we've been told it's still quite current. About 75% of youth aged 15 to 24 reported not using marijuana. We've also heard weed helps you focus. It calms your brain down. Well, regular marijuana use impairs your thinking, attention, and memory. Weed makes you a better driver. It's safer than driving after using alcohol. Well, marijuana actually can impair driving and it's associated with increased risk of collisions. Weed isn't addictive and doesn't consume users. They'll say it is not a gateway drug. We've heard that quite a lot. 1 in 6 adolescents who use marijuana will actually develop a cannabis use disorder. Cannabis side effects. Okay, let's talk about some of the side effects of cannabis. One of them is increased heart rate. It can feel like a flutter in your chest. You can feel chest pain or discomfort. It may mimic an overwhelming feeling of anxiousness, stress, or anger. We'll talk about more of this later, but some people use pot or cannabis to relax themselves, to feel more at ease. Well, over time, that actually may make these feelings worse. Rapid changes in blood pressure. This can be felt as lightheadedness, blurred vision, weakness, confusion, nausea, dizziness, headaches. It can lead to fainting spells when people move from a sitting to a standing position. You can feel an increase in sleepiness, drowsiness, and confusion. This can result in a decrease in reaction time and a decreased awareness of surroundings and a change in perception. Decrease in brain development and mind-muscle connection. This can result in decreased muscle function, difficulty with speech, and trouble with everyday tasks, such as brushing your teeth, getting dressed, cooking and eating, taking showers, doing your chores, socializing, daily communication skills. If you're a student, if you think of this in terms of your student life, this may mean things like, if you play basketball, for example, your mind-muscle connection is not working as quickly. You may have trouble passing, dribbling. If you're supposed to give a presentation, your communication skills will actually suffer and will lower your grades. Dry mouth, cough, dry eyes, red eyes. One of our youth coordinators was a teacher in school, and she said she could tell every single time that a student had been using cannabis because your eyes were a dead giveaway. You'd look drowsy and you'd have bloodshot eyes. They know every time. Problems with your digestive system, constipation, and an increased appetite and weight gain. So now let's talk about more of the rare side effects. Some of those could be uncontrollable nausea and vomiting, severe stomach pains when eating, because this will actually inflame your pancreas, head, neck, lung, and testicular cancers in men, heart attack or stroke, severe damage to the lungs and an uncontrollable cough, short-term memory problems and trouble with focusing. Remember, we talked about school. If you're trying to study, it's hard to retain the information during class. There's potentially long-term brain damage. And there's a controversy right now. They're looking into it whether this is actually irreversible. That means your brain development will be stunted. You can have a decreased sex drive, testosterone, and fertility in men. It may increase the risk of developing an undiagnosed mental illness and suicidal thoughts in those that are high risk. We'll talk more about this one later on as well. It will actually increase your tolerance and your dependence on the substance.
A recent study found that marijuana use may be linked to psychosis in teens.
Hearing things that aren't there, seeing things that aren't there, having delusions, which are fixed false beliefs that the community as a whole doesn't share.
After I'd get high enough, I'd hear stuff that wasn't even, nobody else heard, or I'd see stuff and nobody else would see it, and I was the only one seeing it.
Does psychosis result from marijuana use, or are people who suffer from psychosis more likely to turn to marijuana? The research suggests that both things may be happening. But for clinicians like Christian Thurstone, a psychiatrist in Denver, Colorado, and Leslie Walker at Seattle Children's Hospital, the risks from using marijuana are clear, and many users themselves would agree.
I regularly see kids coming in because they've tried marijuana and they are having trouble with hallucinations, they're having trouble with paranoia, they're having trouble feeling like they're going to die because it distorts your thoughts.
But we also know that this risk of psychosis is dose dependent. So the more marijuana that people are exposed to, the greater their risk of developing psychosis.
It's not just psychosis that may be triggered by marijuana. Studies also indicate a link between marijuana and paranoia.
I think almost everyone I know that's ever smoked has been paranoid from time to time.
I always think something bad is gonna happen. I always think someone's out to get me. I always think, I always think negative when I'm high.
There are other possible effects of marijuana on mental health.
There are a lot of reports of schizophrenia in marijuana users. It's unclear if marijuana is actually causing schizophrenia versus it's bringing out those tendencies that a person may have already had, and it's bringing them out earlier.
In a similar way, for some people, depression seems to accompany marijuana use, but whether marijuana causes their depression isn't yet clear. But what is clear is that there are risks to mental health from marijuana and that more research is needed to understand the risks.
So if you choose to use cannabis, we want to reduce our risk as much as possible. So use a Health Canada approved retailer. Purchase it from somewhere reputable. Otherwise you don't quite know what you're getting. And laced cannabis is still a thing. For quite a while it was laced with meth, and now fentanyl is very popular. Ensure you're in a safe environment. Be somewhere where you can call 911 if you need help. Have a plan if complications occur. Hopefully you're doing it with someone sober, so if someone has a bad reaction, they can call 911 and seek help for you. Start low and go slow. If you're starting, and especially if it's one of the first times you've used cannabis, it's recommended you wait 15 minutes between inhalations to limit the experiencing undesired side effects. If you're ingesting it, wait. In some people, it can take up to 2 hours or more for an edible to actually take effect. So not knowing that, you think it's not doing anything to you and you take more, and it can make your side effects worse. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada recommend vaping or ingestion of cannabis over smoking it. This is to reduce the harm you're doing to your body. Harm reduction is what we always want to be doing. So if you're vaping or you're ingesting it, then you're not doing as much damage to your lungs. So signs of an overdose or a serious reaction, things to look for. So if you're having an allergic reaction, it may show itself in hives, swelling of the lips, eyes, or throat, difficulty breathing. There's slurred speech, delayed reaction time, uncoordinated movement, numbness in limbs, weakness, and excessive tearing. You could have an uncontrollable heartbeat, rapid changes in blood pressure, chest pain, or discomfort. If there's uncontrollable shaking or loss of consciousness. And if you have severe delayed nausea and vomiting, that means if much later after you've done the drug, you find yourself throwing up. So signs of an overdose or serious reaction in children. Because we all have smaller siblings, if something is left out, they may accidentally consume it. If their upper eyelids stop moving, if there's uncontrollable eye movements and they're darting all over the place, dilated pupils, drowsiness, extreme drop in body temperature. Now this can show up as shivering, slowed pulse or heart rate, passing out, clumsiness, memory loss, and slurred speech. If they're breathing really slowly or have weakness, difficulty moving, poor reflexes, and trouble talking. If they've stopped breathing, even comas have been reported. So if any of these occur, we always want you, of course, to seek medical attention. If there's unconsciousness, seizing, difficulty breathing, immediately call 911. You can also call Health Links at the number provided, or visit your local emergency department. Take the person straight to the hospital. So here we just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the signs that a person may have a problem with cannabis. So starting at the top and going around like a clock, some of the signs are problems with communication. We discussed that a little bit. Maybe you're not socializing with your friends like you used to. Maybe the person is having problems giving presentations in class. The next one there, the little guy with the F. Maybe grades have dropped. You're having trouble focusing and concentrating, and your grades are suffering. Grumpy cat. The person is irritable and quick to temper. The next one, if there is a drop in hygiene, the person is not taking as good of care of themselves. Arguing. The person is combative, doesn't communicate the same way they used to. The little guy with the green toque on. If you find you're at the point where you need the drug on a regular basis, if you're scheduling your day around needing to take it. Also, if there's a loss in time, you're losing patches of the day. You see the next one, it looks a little bit like cannabis and a set of keys. If you're driving while doing the drug or have taken the drug and then drive, this shows a substance abuse issue. The calendar, once again, you're not following through on regularly scheduled events. You're losing time again. The next one is confusion. If the person is not mentally processing things the same way they did, if they're seeing things, hearing things. And the top arrow, we talk a lot about this one. We always say it's very open to interpretation, and we've had a lot of students actually guess on this one. Some people say if you're having problems with your blood pressure, that means the standing up and fainting we talked about. Some people say if you've increased the amount you need to take, if your tolerance has increased. So that arrow is kind of a catch-all.
While hookahs have been around for hundreds of years, e-cigarettes are relatively brand new. They were invented in China in 2003 and first introduced in the United States around 2007. Since then, their use has quickly spread.
Definitely see a lot of my friends smoking e-cigarettes. I think it's become popular just because people see other people doing it, and also, again, because of all the flavors that come with it.
I don't think that kids see it as bad as cigarettes, and the people who do are the ones who aren't going to smoke them.
More high school and middle school students now use e-cigarettes than smoke cigarettes. So what is an e-cigarette? And what makes it different from a traditional cigarette?
Well, one thing is that you don't actually smoke an e-cigarette. The vapor from an e-cigarette is different from cigarette smoke, which comes from the burning of tobacco leaves. There is no burning of tobacco with e-cigarettes, only heating of a liquid mixture, often called e-juice.
E-cigarettes come in many forms, shapes, sizes, and colors, and they have different names such as vape pens or personal vaping devices, but they all function in pretty much the same way. To use one, you turn it on to heat up liquid nicotine. The liquid nicotine then produces a vapor, which is inhaled or vaped into the lungs.
Some say e-cigarettes are healthier than regular cigarettes because the vapor doesn't contain the tar and other cancer-causing chemicals that result from burning tobacco. But you're still inhaling nicotine. In fact, some people refer to e-cigarettes as electronic nicotine delivery systems. Here's another question. How addictive is nicotine? A, not nearly as addictive as heroin. B, as addictive as heroin. Or C, more addictive than heroin.
Time's up. How addictive is nicotine? The answer is B, as addictive as heroin, and maybe even C, more addictive. It's hard to measure addictiveness, but it's safe to say that nicotine is one of the most addictive substances we know of.
In fact, when people try to quit smoking, they suffer major withdrawal symptoms including irritability, anxiety, difficulty concentrating, insomnia, and restlessness. And that helps explain why most people who do try to quit on their own fail. Usually within a week, almost 9 out of 10 resume smoking.
Here's our next question. How much nicotine is in an e-cigarette compared to a regular cigarette? A, as much nicotine as a regular cigarette. B, more nicotine. Or C, less nicotine.
How much nicotine is in an e-cigarette compared to a regular cigarette? We apologize. This is a trick question because each of the 3 answers is right and wrong. It can be as much, more, or less. It depends on the particular brand of e-cigarette used and how much liquid nicotine is in the cartridge.
You can't be certain about the amount of liquid nicotine you're using. What you think you're getting may not be what you actually do get.
Some e-cigarettes deliver so little nicotine that smokers who are trying to quit find they don't get the buzz they're looking for and go back to regular cigarettes.
But others deliver a lot more than a tobacco cigarette, and that may lead to even more compulsive nicotine use.
I definitely see e-cigarettes as a new kind of addiction. They are becoming just as integral in people's lives as traditional cigarettes, so you can't deny that people are getting addicted to them.
What do we know about nicotine besides the fact that it's highly addictive? Well, one thing we know is that like any addictive drug, it produces harmful changes in the brain, particularly in the teenage brain, which is still developing. Among other things, recent research indicates that nicotine makes it more likely that a person will become addicted, not only to nicotine, but to other drugs as well.
Another thing we've known for a long time is that nicotine is a powerful poison. Swallowing even small amounts of liquid nicotine can cause vomiting, seizures, and even death. A teaspoonful can kill a small child who comes across a spilled refill bottle.
Some people argue that even if the nicotine in e-cigarettes is addictive, it doesn't cause cancer and other diseases associated with tobacco cigarettes.
But here's the thing. Besides nicotine, e-cigarettes contain other chemicals. This is true also of e-cigarettes that claim to have no nicotine. E-cigarettes lure potentially young customers with flavors such as pineapple, coconut, blueberry, and peanut butter. In fact, there are more than 7,000 varieties of flavored e-cigarettes and e-juice. The fact is that we don't yet know all the potential health effects when the chemicals used in these flavorings are inhaled.
But some things we do know. 2 chemicals that are very common are propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. Both can cause a scratchy throat and dry mouth in the short term, and we have no idea as yet what the long-term effects might be.
We know more about another chemical used in the flavorings in many nicotine liquids, diacetyl. Diacetyl can cause a condition known as popcorn lung. It's called popcorn lung because diacetyl is a chemical in the artificial butter flavoring in popcorn. Many workers in microwave popcorn packaging plants have suffered from popcorn lung and showed symptoms like coughing and shortness of breath. There is no cure, and it can be fatal.
Some smokers are drawn to e-cigarettes because they think it will enable them to quit smoking regular cigarettes. There is some evidence that for adult smokers this may be true, but the jury is still out. We don't really know, and many doctors argue that better methods for quitting are nicotine patches and gums whose effectiveness and safety have been proven. What we know for sure is that very few teenagers vape e-cigarettes in order to quit smoking. Most teens start vaping because they're curious or because they like the different flavors.
It's kind of just like candy. It's kind of just a thing to do. You know, if it tastes like watermelon, it seems like a lot less scary than if it tastes like straight tobacco.
There is also evidence that vaping may actually lead to smoking. A recent study indicates that students who start vaping by the time they enter 9th grade are more likely to start smoking traditional cigarettes than those who don't vape.
There are still a lot of unanswered questions about e-cigarettes because they're so new. But there are some things that all the researchers and experts agree on. If you don't smoke, don't start vaping. There are risks and no health benefits. That's why the federal government has now made it illegal in all states to sell e-cigarettes to anyone under 18.
The risks posed by e-cigarettes are becoming clearer as we learn more about them.
So let's talk about some vaping side effects. A few were mentioned in the video. Bronchiolitis obliterans, aka popcorn lung, is caused by a chemical called diacetyl. Leukemia, it's caused or linked to cancer-causing chemicals called benzene. And there are also device explosions, accidents that can lead to lifelong trauma or disabilities. There's secondhand vapor, just like secondhand smoke, exposing non-vapors to unnecessary chemicals. So some other side effects from nicotine. Nicotine can decrease your brain development. That makes it harder to learn, harder to be happy, harder to control your anger, and it makes feelings of sadness and anxiousness worse. There's also a higher chance of being stuck and feeling like you need nicotine to live. It's very addictive. We've known this for years. So some other safety considerations are that vaping devices can explode. So in order to prevent this, never modify your device. It's made the way it is for a reason. Buy batteries that are compatible with your device and from a trusted source. I mean, I probably wouldn't recommend going in and picking up a bunch of bulk cheap batteries. Don't carry lithium-ion batteries in your pocket or anywhere where they can come in contact with loose coins, keys, or other metal objects. The batteries can actually overheat, catch fire, or even explode when they come in contact with those metal objects. Some incidents have actually caused serious injuries. Keep any spare batteries you have in a protective case. Like we just said, don't throw them in the bottom of your backpack, into your pocket, put them in a case. Read your manufacturer's instructions for storing and recharging your device. And don't exceed the recommended charging time. This can overheat the batteries, and same thing, they can explode. So some safety considerations for the liquids inside your vape. So vaping liquids can be obtained from regulated or unregulated sources. Of course, we always say obtain them from a regulated source. They can contain propylene glycol, ethylene glycol, which is like antifreeze, glycerin, nicotine, harsh metals, contaminants, and a combination of 7,000 different flavoring agents. So there's no information on whether some of these chemicals are safe for inhaling, and all the juices can contain something different. In some unregulated products, even trace amounts of nicotine can be found in some nicotine-free products. So there are a number of people who vape and say, well, it's just water vapor. There may actually be nicotine in that, even though it says there isn't. So more on your vaping liquids. Store them out of sight and out of reach of young children and pets. As was mentioned in the video, even a teaspoon of this could actually kill one of them. Store your vaping liquid in a cool, dry place where it can't be confused for food, drinks, or medicine. Remember, some of this stuff smells pretty good. Close the container securely after each use. You don't want it spilled over, able for someone to take the top off. And wash your hands immediately after handling vaping liquid. This stuff can actually absorb into your skin as well. So if an injury or ingestion occurs, make sure you seek medical attention. So if someone is unconscious, seizing, or having difficulty breathing, again, call 911 right away. You can call Health Links if you have any concerns, or you can visit your local emergency department. Take them to the hospital, call an ambulance.
Yes, according to this repeated nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Why not change to Camels for the next 30 days and see what a difference it makes in your smoking enjoyment? See how Camels agree with your throat. See how mild and good tasting a cigarette can be.
Back in the 1950s and 60s, advertisers made every effort to hide the hazards of smoking. Ads were designed to reassure the public about the health risks of smoking and to promote it as glamorous.
It's hard to imagine anyone falling for these kinds of ads today, but have things really changed that much? Just like the old cigarette ads, ads for e-cigarettes promote them as both healthy and glamorous. The growing popularity of both e-cigarettes and hookahs has led advertisers to leave no stone unturned in marketing to young consumers.
Here's another ad. This one is for one of the most popular brands of e-cigarettes.
We know what smokers want. A truly satisfying taste. Views. Welcome to tomorrow.
That was pretty impressive. But what do we know about Views? Here's another question. Who owns Views? A. Merck, a drug company. B. R.J. Reynolds, a tobacco company. C. Kellogg's, a food company. Or D. Google, a technology company.
Who owns Views? The answer is R.J. Reynolds, the tobacco company. In fact, it's the same company that put out that ad for Camels back in the 1950s. And R.J. Reynolds is not alone. Many of the most popular brands of e-cigarettes are owned by tobacco companies.
Why would tobacco companies such as R.J. Reynolds own and advertise different brands of e-cigarettes? Money. E-cigarettes are a growing and profitable market that tobacco companies want to control.
And there's another possible motive. Tobacco companies have traditionally been interested in the most effective ways of delivering nicotine to the body. If you're addicted to nicotine as a result of using e-cigarettes, there's a good chance you'll move on to regular cigarettes and other tobacco products.
Where can you get help? So the Addictions Foundation of Manitoba, also known as AFM, is one of the options. There is a phone and address listed here. There's also primary health care, the Beatrice Wilson Health Center, or the hospital. You can refer to any one of these. The Addictions Foundation of Manitoba has counselors available at MBCI on Mondays and Tuesdays. Confidential counseling is available regarding your alcohol, drug, or gambling use, or if you just have questions you want to ask them. They provide counseling and support if a family member or one of your close friends is struggling with use, or if you're just having a hard time dealing with it. Basically, they're there if you need someone to talk to. So some 24-hour support services, the Manitoba Suicide Line, Kids Help Phone. Kids Help Phone also has a text app as well if you would prefer to do it that way. Clinic Crisis Line, First Nations and Inuit Hope for Wellness Helpline, the Sexual Assault Crisis Line, Child and Family Services, and of course, Addictions Foundation of Manitoba Youth Services. And all of these numbers are toll-free.